Wayne Sharp. Welcome to our global show. It's a pleasure to have you here, and
Pleasure to be here.
you're with us from just outside of London, Wayne. You've got a few offices around the world.
Yeah, well, not as many as I used to in my previous life, but we've got a office where I am at the moment. It's a home office, but we have up to 7 people here on any given day. We've got an office in central London, another one on the Gold Coast, where predominantly our administration is conducted in Australia, and all our technology development is done there back there in Australia as well.
So Wayne, you're the founder of the Carbon Trade Exchange, CTX. Can you tell us a little bit about what that does?
Sure, no problem. The global emission footprint is calculated in tons of CO2. So every business has some sort of carbon footprint, which means how much their business activities produce. On the other side of the equation, there are projects out there that are producing renewable energy or some other type of energy without emitting CO2, or other types of projects that are extracting CO2 or other greenhouse gas from the atmosphere. All of those things are measured in tons of CO2, and for the people who are producing carbon credits, that is, each carbon credit is equal to 1 tonne of CO2. What the companies who are making the emissions can buy those credits, cancel them, and effectively negate their impact on the global ecosystem and on climate change. What we do as an exchange is we do that electronically. So we bring the certificates that have been issued through a registry, much like a share registry. They're posted on the exchange, and then the buy-side client can join the exchange, log in, and then purchase what it is they want. And depending on the type of project and the credit standards that we use, which are quite numerous, they're then cancelled on their behalf. All of this is controlled and quite well, I won't say regulated, but it's a very meticulous process that's gone through to ensure validity of the carbon credits. That's why we link to legitimate registries, much like a share registry does for a stock exchange.
Okay, and then for the BBX people, they can purchase these offsets using their BBX money. So
Exactly.
The carbon you create by doing the activity, transportation and energy that you do can then offset the footprint that you create in the world.
Exactly. And you know, what we do as an exchange is for most companies, depending on the size of the company, the exchange is a wholesale market, but that means you need to be a pretty large company to use the exchange. Alternatively, we do smaller trades, what you call over the counter, where we'll buy the certificates off the exchange on their behalf and do all the background activity. Of course, they're paying more like a business B2B retail type price rather than a wholesale price that the larger companies would pay.
Yep.
You know, so I mean, a lot of small to medium businesses might have a carbon footprint of only, you know, a couple of 100 tonnes. It's not financially viable for them to justify joining the exchange and all the logistics for that. Larger companies could have hundreds of thousands of tonnes a year of carbon footprint. Obviously, that's a different animal, and they're the ones who need to buy at a wholesale rate.
Yep.
The BBX client base, as you know, is predominantly small to medium business. So we'll be doing majority of our transactions through BBX directly or as a B2B semi-retail trade.
Yep. And it just allows that business to put on its website that it's carbon neutral or carbon zero, and a great way for everybody to contribute to mitigate the impact of climate change on the planet.
Exactly. I mean, look, you know, let's be realistic. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to work out that, you know, one thing that has happened with COVID is it's proven that human activity is causing what's the impact on the climate globally, because when everything stopped, all of a sudden everything cleaned up. So businesses of all scale, and particularly consumers, are more and more aware of it. It's a big competitive edge for business to take the first step. It's also a protection factor, because if their competitors do it and they don't, then that's a selling point against them. So either way, we believe it's a material thing. It doesn't cost that much money. This is the bizarre part. I mean, a lot of people have got this misconstrued idea that offsetting their emission footprint is ineffective or very costly. The reality is, if you look at all the fossil fuel companies, they get massive subsidies from government. The environmental projects don't. So this is the environmental finance subsidy they get directly from business through our system.
Yep. Wayne, you didn't wake up one day, decided to create this, but what motivated you to begin the whole thing in the first place?
Well, in my previous life, I run a global business, as you know, and as I was traveling around the world, the environmental impacts became increasingly obvious to me. And I just started wondering, am I the only person seeing this? I mean, everywhere I went in the world, I saw, massive negative environmental impacts and, airports packed with hundreds of planes and gazillions of people and roads that were endlessly full of traffic and all this. And I thought, there's no way the planet can sustain this. Surely someone else has noticed. And I got involved with a group that ultimately led me to the Prince of Wales. Having met with him, as you do, at his grandma's house, then I went. He basically formed a thing called Accounting for Sustainability. When I went to that meeting, I realised there was a lot of very highbrow people, but no entrepreneurs. And I thought, you know what? Entrepreneurs are going to save the planet, not bureaucrats, accountants, and politicians.
Yeah, it's great to. I do recall a famous photo when you met Prince Charles and offered him a business card. He was a great doctor.
Yeah, well, it was a bit unique because it didn't occur to me. I remember everyone freaked out. He laughed his head off because little did I know the protocol is that no one has ever handed him a business card before. And he went around showing my business card to everybody, saying, "Did you get one of these?" So he was bemused and impressed by the fact that I went ahead and did it. So yeah,
I think being an Australian, you could probably get away with that.
Somehow I did, yes.
Wayne, climate change is a very topical subject right now. And so what do you think stops, in a nutshell, what stops companies and governments from taking it more seriously and getting results faster than 2072 or something?
Well, look, the first thing is that the government thing is, particularly in places like Australia, it's all political, driven by money, corruption, I will call it, frankly. The reality is that it's down to business to make a difference, in my opinion. Governments will put in policies, but they're putting in policies that, won't even be held accountable in their lifetime. I mean, the people who are saying, net carbon zero by 2050, they'll be dead. So who cares what promise they make? They don't have to worry about it. Their kids have to worry about it, maybe, their grandkids perhaps, but certainly not them. They don't have to be held accountable as something that's going to happen in 30 years' time. It's ridiculous. In business, we're accountable to our consumers and our clients and our stakeholders and even our supply chains today, tomorrow, next week, next year. So, we need to start stepping it up, in my opinion. I've always thought that. Maybe I was a bit ahead of my time 10 years ago when we really kicked this off. But, here we are. And these days, everybody is much more aware of the problem. And, we're just trying to provide a simple solution. Frankly.
Yep, brilliant. And, there's no excuse now with things like BBX options where people can trade spare capacity to fund these things. So if business leads it, hopefully it'll all get done. Wayne?
Look, a great example of that, John, is where we did the announcement we made earlier this year where airlines could trade empty seats in exchange for their offsets to offset their emissions that they have to do under regulatory regime.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you know what? They still didn't do it because they're just trying to be profitable rather than be socially responsible. In my opinion, the businesses that you're dealing with particularly are more engaged directly with their consumer than some of those guys that, probably never get on an airplane and travel business class, or if they do it quietly.
Yeah.
So they're not engaging with anybody, and they're not really touching the marketplace, whereas the BBX clients are, and therefore they should be much more aware of the positive impact of doing something positive and the potential negative impact of doing nothing.
Yep. Wayne, I know you've got very strong views on COVID, and we haven't got time to go through those today. But what would you suggest for businesses out there that need to be, I talk about being a little bit nimble, a little bit agile, rather than this pivot word that gets up my nose, but on how to do some stuff to combat some of the issues with COVID. Have you got any little tips on what a business could do to help itself get through this this mess that we're in?
Well, look, first of all, I think it's smart play to work out what government support leverage you can use in your business. That's the first thing, because let's face it, all of us in business know the government probably never gave us anything, particularly small business, right? So take what you can get. Secondly, I think that you need to make sure that you've got a team on board that's capable of mentally being resilient and maybe broadening their direction if necessary. But in our case, what we did was the opposite. We focused. We said, look, let's work out which part of our business is going to be able to make money during this time when everyone's sat at home, zooming away like this. How can we best sell to those people, and what do we need to bring to the table in order to do so? So the first thing I started doing was getting, I brought on a couple of people as sales support, as an example, right? And they're just out there hammering away on LinkedIn and social media, trying to find people who they think could have a connection, setting up meetings for our salespeople. Where we used to have to physically have a meeting with people to pitch to them, now we're able to have a lot more meetings per week. One of our relatively recent sales people, a very senior woman, she had 25 sales meetings last month, when usually that would be what we'd expect someone to do in a quarter, maybe. So of course, we're trying to present also to bigger companies. Well, guess what? That's one thing which we had a lot of trouble doing. You couldn't get in the door with some of the big decision makers before. Well, now they're all working from home, they're zooming away, they can give you more time, or give you some time at least, more easily, because they don't have to physically be in meetings. No one's coming in, barging in their office, interrupting them, etc. So as long as you've got a good presentation, they're more likely to hear you. And finally, I think that because of this environmental awareness, I'll call it, that's happened as a result of COVID, in our case, we identified the fact that more companies needed to be aware of it, and we could modify our presentation to them somewhat to try and get their attention more readily. Look, every business is different, but I can see dramatic differences in restaurants, for example, or pubs or whatever. Some who respond well and some who respond appallingly. One pub I used to go to all the time, I walked in the door and the woman attacked me with the bloody spray. And I'm like, get out of my face, Like, why do I want to go in there? I didn't feel welcome at all.
Yeah.
Right? I went into a supermarket once, and the first thing they said is, "Where's your mask?" And I'm like, "How about hello?
Yeah.
Welcome."
Yeah.
So I think getting the staff engaged in how to make sure that they treat life as a positive, despite whatever restrictions, is probably also a critical part, and keeping a positive momentum. We worked out how we could continue to have physical meetings at least once a week, right? Kept within the boundaries of whatever bullshit rules are out there. But, just basically tried to say, let's try and make business as normal as possible. Let's make sure we keep people engaged personally. We're having regular communications. Now, the internal communication is an important part, but again, you can overdo that as well. Just because everyone's able to suddenly talk to each other from home doesn't mean they should.
Yep.
So I think it's a little bit of, imagine that you had your business and you just acquired it from someone. What would you do to improve it today but it's your business, so you don't want to change it. You don't want to do what a lot of people do and buy a restaurant and change the menu and, decide that they're not going to cook steak anymore. They're going to be vegan and then lose all their clients. Well, let's not pivot that far.
Yep. No, it's some good tips, Wayne. Wayne, I talk about starting businesses with the end in mind as my number one tip on starting any business. You've successfully floated a business on the stock exchange for many millions of pounds. What was your vision with that? Did you adhere to that, or did it just did it happen? What was that journey?
Well, I think what I learned the hard way about that is go to the market with the team that you've got that works. Don't try and bring in the old grey-haired expert third parties who don't know anything about your bloody business. I got sucked into that in London. The end result was I ended up delisting the company, bought back other minority shareholders. It was an experience, but not necessarily a happy one. And also a lot of people waste exhaustive amounts of money and forget that capital raising and going public is an event that's it's bigger than your marriage. Yep. Sorry to say. So, you better be really prepared for it. And you better be not only prepared to get married, but have children, 3 dogs, and a couple extra cars. Yep. So, that's the sort of situation that you're in business if you decide to go public. I think that setting out with a view to go public, this is a very American thing that they think, I've got an IPO, I want to be the next Facebook sort of thing. Well, that's great if you've got access to venture capital and you've got a funky idea and all that. But for most of your business operators, they're more likely to be able to build a business successful that could be made available for a trade sale than they would be for an IPO.
Yep.
So realistically, that's the type of business you want to build, which means the first thing is you want to make sure you're profitable, which means you're using every resource available to you smartly, including your BBX account, to maximize your cash profits so that your business looks as healthy as possible. Now, what you don't want to do also is, misconstrue what your business is doing, because, the trade turnover should be a critical part of your business if you're ever going to think to sell it. I've lost count how many businesses I've seen that sort of kept that under the table, and then, the new business owner, when they bought it, could not understand for the life of me why half their customers went away. Well, it's because they closed their bloody trade account. And all of a sudden they went, well, okay, I'll just go somewhere else where they do take trade.
Yep.
So I think, be honest, be straightforward, build the business profitably, make sure that, you're doing your business smart. And if you really, you got to make a decision at some point in every business whether you want to run a small to medium business and be happy with that, right? And just, have a great lifestyle and work hard, but, play hard. Whether you want to expand and make a bigger business, or whether you want to have something big enough that could either be an acquisition target for a larger competitor potentially, right? And, a lot of people treat their competitors like they're hostile. Well, they're their competitor. They're not your enemy, right? You can learn from what they do. And maybe if you engage with them through an industry association or some other way, guess what? You might find that one day down the track, they're going to make you an offer too good to refuse.
Cool. Wayne, you've done a lot of trades over the years. What was your best one?
Well, there's been some interesting ones. Let's put it that way. I remember trading a shopping centre for a boat once. I didn't really want the boat, and I thought I had it flipped, but that didn't work out. So I ended up with a boat that I lost a bit of money on.
Yeah. You got a lovely penthouse, for instance, on the Gold Coast.
That is probably my best deal. So I basically had someone the trade sales guy went and pitched to the developer to take 25% of the purchase price on trade on a penthouse apartment, which was millions. And guess what? he accepted. He spent the trade on painting the outside of the building, doing certain refurbishments, tiling the bloody driveways of that and 3 other buildings he was doing, landscaping on that and a couple of other properties, etc., etc. So he got his value for money easy. The Bartercard merchants in those days who did that. Sorry to mention that name, but anyway, and the trade merchants, they got the benefit of the new business they wouldn't have got. Everybody won, and I ended up with a beautiful property which I still own 22 years later.
Yep.
So
it's worth quite a few $million now.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, Wayne, what would be your number one tip for anyone out there to get better results from their trade account? Just if you had to pick one thing.
Well, I think there's 2 things. One is communication, and the other one is make sales. Because if you want to get attention from your trading team at the exchange, then you're not going to do that if you never sell anything. If all you want to do is just spend, and as if you're spending down to spend out, then you're not going to have their attention and support. I think communication is the next biggest key. I mean, in our type of business, it's a little more difficult because we're not part of a normal business operation, so we're a bit unique. But if I look at all the businesses I know that have been in the trade systems over the years, those that are actively engaged with the trade coordinators and even working with some of the salespeople to find the things that they want and go sort them. I mean, to be honest with you, that's one of the things that set me, for example. Look, I came across the other day, I got a liquidation sale for a jewelry store that's been running for 28 years and he's closing down. Of course, it's probably COVID tipped him over the line. And I thought, this guy's jewelry is really expensive. Okay. And I thought, there's a BBX client, let's refer him.
Yep. I just before this call today, I was talking to a client and he's got a £6,000 marketing plan that he's putting together. He spoke to the supplier, gave me the lead. I spoke to the guy, happy to do it. Bingo, there he saved himself thousands of pounds in cash. Just in
exactly. And in this guy's case, he's going to end up with a store that's closed with a whole bunch of jewelry. What the hell is he going to do with it then after that? He may as well sell it all through you guys and have some trade that he can spend to fund his retirement if that's what he does.
Yep.
Right.
Wayne, you've travelled the world and met some interesting people. What stories that you can tell us about? What was the most awe-inspiring person that you've ever met, and why was that?
Ooh. Well, yeah, it's a difficult question. I mean, there have been a lot. I've met royalty and high-level business people and sports people and politicians all over the world. I think one of the most interesting people I met who was incredibly engaged was Julia Gillard, who was the Prime Minister of Australia. She came down and saw our stand at Carbon Expo in Australia. She just lit up. I mean, she just really wanted to have the photos at our stand. She loved what we were doing. And getting that sort of engagement is hard to forget. Obviously the meetings with Prince Charles were pretty hard to forget as well. I mean, I went on to sponsor the Black Tie Red Cross ball at which they raised £2 million, not from me, for charity. I think one of the most unique meetings I ever had was in the UAE many years ago. We had our system was going to go into the UAE. They have 7 Emirates, and the guy who was the head of security for the Emirates wanted to meet with me to discuss licensing what we were doing. Anyway, we had a meeting in the Hilton Hotel, and at the end of it, he goes, "Oh, look," he said, "we're launching this new thumbprint biometric scanning system tomorrow. I want you to be the first." And I'm like, "I've got an 8:30 flight, mate." Tomorrow morning. He goes, "Well, I could delay your flight." We own the airline. So that was pretty cool. I didn't, by the way.
Yeah.
I couldn't understand why the hell I would want a thumbprint entry into the UAE on a permanent basis. Didn't quite add up for me.
There you go. So, Wayne, you spend a lot of time traveling the world, and it's leading any business is a lonely place at times, and there's a lot of talk with mental illness and people that are struggling around the world. Do you have any strategies that overcome, being the lonely at the top scenario in running any size business?
Well, look, I found that probably in a large degree, you get back what you give out, right? So, I engage with helping business people generally, not because I have to, because A, I like it, and B, sometimes then they're coming back to me with ideas, referrals, that sort of stuff. So I think over time, you need to be able to build a network. I mean, one of the advantages I had back in Australia and here, when I was more actively involved in the barter exchange networks, is exactly that: going to trade shows, going to the events, meeting people. You look at the people that are doing that, and they're building a unofficial support network as well, right? I mean, all business is a lonely business. You don't have to be running a big global company to be a little lonely at the top. I mean, I can remember people who sold a delicatessen, and they hadn't been on holidays for 5 years. They sold it using the trade system as a big chunk of the transaction. You shouldn't have to wait that long, guys. I mean, at the end of the day, you've got to enjoy the fruits of your labour. Otherwise, why the hell are you doing it? And I think importantly as well is, it's one thing to have personal friends, but you need to be able to talk about business. And to do that, you need to be talking with your peers, at least in other businesses, even if they're not in your sector.
Yep. Wayne, you've been in many countries and recruited a lot of people and met some interesting characters like me.
There's not many like you, John. Thank goodness.
What tips would you have with people when they start to employ people? What would be your number one tip with employing people?
I guess it depends a lot on what industry you're in. See, if you're in a service business, you better be good at leading rather than demanding, right? Because people in the service industry will just move on otherwise. If they've got good leadership, means that they feel engaged with the business. They feel like they're part of it and they own part of it, even if they don't. In certain businesses, there's other challenges. I mean, if you're manufacturing things, I mean, the question is, do you actually know how these things are made? I mean, maybe you bought the business and you don't. Well, my suggestion is learn. I mean, it's one of the first things I did. My very first sales job was selling bulk frozen foods to people in their homes in Sydney, in Australia. I didn't know shit about bloody bulk frozen foods, but I knew the bloke who recruited me had a nice car. So what did I do? I went down to the factory and spent half a day every week for the next 6 months down there, understanding how what we were selling was made. So I think that in my view, if you think about that and you think about the people you're recruiting, what's the job they're going to have to do? Can you do it? And if you can, how would you do it best? And what type of person you're going to get? And that, I think, is the other key thing, is try and, look, we just recruited a new office manager for our Australian office. We decided to use a recruitment agency because in the past we'd made some bad decisions. We wanted someone to do, to actually do reference checking and give us a short list of quality candidates, and that's exactly what we got. Okay. Now, when I did it, because Mr. We can do everything, I posted a thing on Facebook. 2 years later, the bloody job advert's still there, and there's 67 applicants that I'd never looked at.
Yep.
There, right? So if you really want to do good recruitment, I still think that a lot of that is also how you're perceived. In every industry I've worked in, I've striven to be the best in that industry, or at least present as the best, straight down the middle, and doing exactly what you say you'll do. Don't try and be master of everything. Be really good at that one thing or that one group of things that all relate to each other. What that means is that people will start to come to you. right? And, I mean, that's been the case. I mean, we've got 5 or 6 applicants for sales jobs, sales roles with us right now from all different parts of the world. And they just want to be able to sell something that's current and exciting and positive, yes, but they're just more interested in engaging with the team that's positive and out there and presenting the business in a positive manner.
Yep. So Wayne, what's next on the agenda for Wayne Sharp?
Well,
What you can tell me about?
What should be doing, or what am I doing? Look, the issue of climate change is astronomical. In 2015, Paris Agreement was signed at what they call COP21, which is Conference of the Parties. I mean, it's a scary thought to think that the COP26 that's going to be, should have been in England right now, or just be finishing now, means that they've been negotiating on how to deal with climate change for 26 years. I mean, this is outrageous. I mean, what the hell? I thought about, maybe what they should do with these climate change negotiators is say, look, you've got 2 years to get a deal done or you're sacked. And then the next lot, you say, well, you got 12 months to get a deal done or you're sacked. And then the next lot after that, you say, you got 12 months to do this or you're executed. You'd be surprised what that inspiration might do for the negotiations. Anyway, unfortunately, that's illegal. So, look, the bottom line is that we've built a technology solution for countries to house their registry solutions to issue the credits that they need to do under the Paris Agreement. So carbon credits will take a whole nother level in the near future, where countries will be buying, developed countries will be buying off poorer countries. It's not the only solution, obviously, what we're trying to do. I mean, at the end of the day, it's going to require a lot of money and a lot of change of business environments. The commercial businesses, ranging from small, medium to large, and even corporates, really have to stop fluffing around with greenwashing and get on with actually doing something positive, especially if it doesn't cost that much. So for me, look, I just figured that this type of business, it'll certainly be my swan song. Would we go public again? It's unlikely. We'd probably look for a trade sale next time around. The public thing really is a young man's game. And why is it so? Well, the reason it is because it requires a lot of effort, and it also requires a lot of attention, and there are a lot of distractions and external costs. So, I don't think in terms of getting the job done, what we're trying to do, I don't think I'd go through that again. In terms of business opportunities, we are constantly riddled with opportunity to diversify into related business sectors. What I'm doing instead is seeking to engage a network of people who already do that for a living, so that we'll create those relationships. The downside of that is you have less control. So of course people do shit they shouldn't do. They decide they get greedy, they do something stupid, whatever. But at the end of the day, I don't think that we'll be diversifying anytime soon. And more importantly, I think that the future of the issue of climate change is so prevalent. Really, what we've got to do is make sure we keep building the tech solutions that are going to solve those problems for as many businesses as possible, small and large. Excellent.
Wayne, it's been my absolute delight to have you on the show, and I trust that people watching this can take a good lot of tips away and some ideas to help them in their business and the environment and other issues that I know you're passionate about. Thank you very much for joining us today, and it's been a pleasure, Wayne Sharp.
Thanks, John. My pleasure too.